Hey, everybody. Oops, an error occurred. Okay, we are live. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Wendorf. I am the founding CEO of EQUUS, and I am joined with Adam Ramcharan, who's in California right now, but he is definitely a digital nomad. Ram and I are the designers and facilitators of our upcoming course, Assertiveness for Life and Leadership. We love this course. It's a 14-week course. And so we're live for, about half an hour or so, depending on what's happening for everyone, just so people can join us in a conversation about assertiveness, self-agency, healthy self-entitlement, how to set boundaries, how to live authentically. And we're here to answer any questions that you may have about the course. People have written in some questions for us, so we can start with some of those. But just as an introduction, Ram, to this course that we're doing, anything that you'd like to share about why you love it so much and why you feel like it's a unique offering?
Yeah, well, thank you, Kelly. It's why I love it so much and why I feel it's a unique offering. Well, I kind of like to preface it by saying, the reason we came up with this is Kelly and I both found in our kind of life as coaches that oftentimes people who are very sensitive or empathic people might not even know that they're empathic, but typically people like that receive messages from a very young age that it's not okay for them to express or have their own needs met. They regulate themselves by taking care of others. And until that pattern is seen and shifted, very often they fail to show up as leaders in their own lives because they don't have a sense that self-agency is okay. Not only that, they may feel actually threatened by the thought of advocating for themselves. And this is a deep nervous system pattern. So as we were talking about this, and we said, we should do an assertiveness training for empaths. And then we're like, actually, it's a really good idea. We've changed the name this time because a lot of people who are empathic don't know it. So Assertiveness for Life and Leadership just seemed more apt because this is both about one's interpersonal relationships, family, significant other, friends, and one's professional relationships, and your day-to-day people you might not know very well. It changes the way that you hold yourself in action and in relationship. And I have not seen anybody who completed this course with us who hasn't reported some sort of significant change in their experience of themselves. Very often we have this, we have a lot of emphasis on self-awareness, obviously. You can't change yourself without being aware of yourself. And I think just that, people naming, being aware of their patterns, recognizing their patterns, and then learning that they can start to shift them, that gives a huge amount of freedom for people to start to, again, shift the way they show up in life. So I love it because, for one thing, every time we do it, it's a new, fresh discovery for me. I get to review the material. It's had a huge impact on my life. But then also watching people over the course of the 14 weeks together, watching people really come alive in ways that they may not even have thought of, and watching them apply that in their lives is I find extraordinary.
Yeah, really well said, Ram. And we have found that also what can happen is that it can be very triggering to set a boundary or to articulate yourself in an authentic way or state your needs or make clear requests. And so we made sure, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we made sure that there's a big component around regulating your nervous system so that you can enter into these spaces that can be triggering with a lot more calm and a lot more intelligence. Oftentimes, people might fold their cards and not articulate their needs, their wants, what they're trying to make happen in a moment, or they may overdo it, right, and come out kind of especially hard or disconnecting or abrupt, or they may wait until it's kind of too late, where they've finally had it and then they just lose it with folks. And then that sets up a pattern where yeah, you see, I tried to set a boundary. It didn't go well. Therefore, I shouldn't express myself in this way because I can't trust myself not to, that I won't blow things up or that people won't behave badly towards my self-agency. So it's ninja stuff, I would say, right? It really is ninja stuff.
It's ninja stuff in the sense of kind of psycho-spiritual warriors, people who are really ready to look at aspects of themselves that may not be so comfortable, but in doing that, there's a great self-empowerment that becomes possible. A lot of it is also looking at people's core fears of, being loved, being liked, being accepted, and all that. And I think, different personality types relate to those core fears or defend themselves in different ways. And as you mentioned, the sensitive, empathic personality type will tend to make themselves small, shrink back from conflict, not feel safe in asserting themselves, hold back until often it's too much, and then explode or overcompensate. So how wonderful, as you pointed out, to be able to understand the language of your nervous system, because all of these psychological states trigger nervous system responses. So when somebody gets anxious, that's your nervous system telling you that you're perceiving some threat in the environment. It doesn't mean there is one. So as we really go into this in a real detail in the first couple of classes, give people really experiential understanding of their body literacy, their somatic literacy, to be able to understand and track their nervous system process and learn how to self-regulate in relationship.
So if you're the sort of person who shrinks away from conflict, or just so you go along to get along, or perhaps you spiritually bypass and say, oh, it just doesn't matter that much to me, I'm just not going to get involved, or you are pretty calm for a while and then you just sort of blow up, and then you're calm for a while and then kind of blow up, or you have found a professional and personal glass ceiling because on the other side of that ceiling really is some hard conversations that need to happen, or some realignment of agreements with people, or a reestablishment of different expectations. But that part there is just a little too mysterious, hard, challenging. You don't feel equipped. You're not sure you have the right words on how to deal with that so that you can get to the next level personally and professionally. If you're somebody who just kind of prefers not to get involved in interpersonal conflict or hard conversations or courageous conversations, all of these reasons are good reasons to come to this course. If you are worried in the face of feedback, you get worried about receiving feedback, or you get worried about giving feedback, this is also a great reason to come and do this course. I'm wondering, Ram, if we should show the syllabus just briefly and then maybe break into some questions. How does that sound?
Sure. I mean, you and I could go on having a conversation for hours, but
yeah, I know. We totally could. So bear with me. I'm just looking for my screen. Where is it? Window. Here we go. The preview. Let's see how this goes. It's not showing up. So what I think we're going to do then is we'll just read to you some of the high points from the syllabus for Assertiveness for Life and Leadership. And Ram, I'll just go through some of these. Do you have this up, or I can just go through it?
Why don't you read each one and we can expand a sentence or two?
Okay, cool. So we have 14 sessions. There's a break in the middle of the course for integration. And we start out with a kind of baseline. How do you show up now in the face of interpersonal and intrapersonal relationships? How well do you assert your needs, your wants, your desires, make your clear requests, create alliances with folks? Just to kind of start out like with some self-awareness. And then we go into a section on what is empathy. And empathy, what does empathy have to do with assertiveness? Well, what you'll learn over this course is that true assertiveness actually connects you with other. And it doesn't distance you from another, because you're connecting in with your true self. You're connecting with the other to have an authentic exchange with them. And so opening up those empathic faculties actually helps you to become more assertive. And then the body is barometer of self-awareness. Do you want to say anything about that, Ram?
Yeah, it's a phrase I came up with. I use it a lot in my work because I have a strong somatic component in my background, which basically means working with the living experience of the body, meaning how we experience ourselves physically, emotionally, as beings in time and space. That's really what somatics is about, and a large part of that is understanding that the body very often is telling you where you are psychically inside yourself. So the body doesn't lie. If there's a tension, if there's an anxiety, if there's a feeling of ease, it's reflecting something going on in your psyche, which is either internal, intrapersonal, or has to do with your relationships, either immediate or, if you're very sensitive, very often the collective. So that class is really about body literacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then we go into what is assertiveness. We get into detail about what it actually means. And we debunk some myths about what assertiveness is, and we also, more importantly, what it is not. Discernment, toxic relationships versus worthy adversaries. Ram, you want to share anything about that one?
Important one, very important one, because very often, but again, particularly people who are a bit more on the sensitive, empathic end of the spectrum, don't learn to recognize that there are people who are not really interested in other people's well-being. And so it's a spectrum. It's typically not either or, but we do find people over on a more kind of sociopathic end of the spectrum. And very often when we're in relationship with these people, we don't know it. We just feel something's off. We're not having our needs met, but we can't really pinpoint the toxic behavior. So we really go into what is it in relationship that is healthy and what is not healthy. And what are you allowed to do about it?
Yeah, beautiful.
It's a question that's often not really addressed.
That's right. Yeah. The care and feeding of empaths. Being assertive is an embodied experience. And so how do we take care of our body, mind, spirit so that it can show up in a robust way with others? Boundaries, lines in the sand, self-agency. Ram?
A good one. This is really a reframe of an understanding of what is a boundary, because typically, for instance, we'll say we set a boundary against someone's behavior. You can't do it. This is learning about how we define ourselves through boundaries, hard boundaries, softer boundaries, lines in the sand. And what does self-agency really feel like? What are your blocks to it?
Great. We carry on with more of the self-agency topic and other assertions. We just take more of a deep dive on really working the work around how it feels to be in embodied self-agency and how we articulate our needs, because we often don't have those words, sentences, phrases in our minds because we weren't raised as children to learn how to articulate ourselves in this way. Difficult conversations, candor, care, and challenge. Ram, I'll let you take that one.
This is one that, like we were speaking before, very often, we find it uncomfortable to have conversations that, are uncomfortable or difficult. When feedback needs to be given, or when something isn't working in a relationship and we sort of avoid addressing the issue. So how to show up in a way that is, we talk about moving from a power over dynamic to a power with dynamic. It's a big part of it here, because by nature, if you're drawn to do this course, you are somebody who feels the needs of other people. So how can we come from an equal place in these relationships?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Giving and receiving feedback. That is, that says it all right there, because that can be a very fraught space for folks. How to do it well, how to be clear, how to be concise, how to receive it well, because feedback is a gift. The awakened empath in conflict, Rom.
The awakened empath in conflict. So conflict here, we reframe it. Conflict is not a bad thing. Conflict is a necessary and unavoidable part of human life, in case you hadn't noticed. As much as we want to avoid conflict, we do find ourselves in it again and again. So how can we enter a space of conflict in a way that is really looking for it as a way to move a relationship towards a resolution of something that was not sustainable? The reason we get into conflict is because there's something that is not being, it's out of match in a relationship. How can we address that something? Looking at conflict as an opportunity.
Asserting ourselves through time and space. So this is really about how do we manifest ourselves in the world? How do we show up, take up space, create things in our lives as a way of really showing who we are, expressing our true selves, creating endeavors, projects, creative expressions that are ways that we assert ourselves in the world as our authentic selves. So it's not so much about how we engage with others, but how we engage with ourselves, our sense of purpose, our meaningful purpose, and then how we put that out into the world. The second to last core class is empaths as the new leader. Over to you, Rom.
Yeah, that one is really, so at this point, everybody's gone through this journey, and I've never seen somebody go through this course and not have had some significant shifts at that point. So we really go into how does it feel for each person, each participant, to step into their life as equipped with all this new knowledge, new tools, new information about themselves, new understanding, and to show up as a leader. So we feel that people who have empathic and sensitive abilities make the best leaders for obvious reasons. They're not out to conquer at all costs. It's really about, again, moving from power over to power with. What does that sort of leadership look like? It's really powerful.
Yeah. And then the session 14, the final session, is a big review. We love to go back over things again and again so that the learning stays integrated. And then the final class is a big review. Some of the ways that we will be learning together, meditation, self-awareness, and presencing, as Rom said, somatics. Somatics is, Rom, do you mind, for anyone who doesn't know what that term means, to describe what somatics means?
Well, somatics, again, it just means, there's somatics as somatic movement. We don't really do that in the class. But what we do, again, is coming back to somatic literacy. It's directly experiencing yourself as being a living embodied entity. Now, that might sound like, well, of course I'm a living embodied entity, but we so often live in a model of ourselves, which is very, very conditioned. What's the word that you like to use? Colonized. And so we want to decolonize our body mind and just come back to an organic understanding of the wisdom of our body. The body has tremendous wisdom to it, that it turns from one cell into this thing and keeps alive for however many years. So we can actually learn to listen to that wisdom and have that inform our minds and our relationships. That's a somatic viewpoint. Another way to say, like, truly holistic.
Yes. And very much aware of how our body experiences life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just a couple of things I want to say about our view of learning, and you can add or subtract to this as you like. It's very much about total self-learning. So when you show up as your total self, that's why we, again, check in with people always on the emotional level. How are you doing? Physically, how are you feeling? We have people track their felt sense. Not just learning from the head, because just learning from the head is not as powerful as when you have a united sense of all of your energy really working towards learning, then real breakthrough can happen. And I can say we do it on 3 levels. There's the intrapersonal. We have people looking within themselves to see, okay, let me understand myself. Why do I have this pattern? What parts of myself are not dialoguing with others? And then we'll get into this a little more, the relationship lab, interpersonal. There's a huge amount of that. And then we also bring in a kind of more spiritual transpersonal view where we see that how is it to shift our frame, so that we're not necessarily just holding it within the personal, but we can start to look at a broader view of how does life want to express itself through us. All these levels, we're mostly working with the interpersonal and intrapersonal, but there's more.
Yeah. So we work a lot with neuro rewiring so that we actually change our brains and change our behaviors and change our mindsets. We do dialogue, we do role play so that people can actually role play being in conflict with someone, or setting a boundary with someone, or creating a new alliance with somebody. We pair people into peer support groups so they do one-on-one coaching with each other. We have what's called a relationship lab, and that is the homework between classes where you are going to be practicing and taking out into the world and actually doing some of the new skill sets that you learn in the course. And then after the course is over, we have an alumni group that meets regularly once a month for continued support. We call that Life Lab.
Yeah. And that's, obviously with the understanding that it's actually kind of borrowed from an Eastern school of thought, but that your life is your laboratory to experience yourself and learn.
Mm-hmm.
So again, EQUUS is very much about experiential learning here. We don't want to just give people a bunch of theory and send them on their way. That's not really, in the end, going to help when it comes to navigating interpersonal relationships.
So we have a few questions that have come in by email, and we open the floor. People can throw their questions in the chat, and we'll answer them as we go. We have our wonderful dear Kelsey, who is our wing woman over in the EQUUS offices, helping us with this live talk. But I've got a few here. So the one sent in, I'm concerned that as I begin to change and have boundaries, I will receive pushback from others. Can you talk to me about that?
You want to take that, or shall I?
I think we both should. Why don't you start and I'll go too.
Yes, you may, because you're changing scripts. And if it's, say, with family, that those scripts have been in place for years or decades. So we definitely go into how to navigate the pushback. And it has a lot to do with coming into one's sense of one's authentic needs and what we call healthy self-entitlement. Because as you do that, it will confuse some of the people you've been in relationship with, because they're not used to it. They're used to your conditioned responses. As you start to change those, they'll kind of go, wait a minute. But the opportunity then is there to have the whole relationship come into a new dynamic, and they can free themselves in the process. So as you show up differently, it actually starts a ripple effect through everybody in your life.
Yeah, on the positive side, you're modeling new things, new behaviors, new ways to break free of, patterns that are limiting for everybody involved. On the challenging side, yes, I mean, there's a term for it. It's called change back behaviors. Another word for it is tribal shaming. No one necessarily means to do it. It's not that there's some hidden malicious agenda. It's that their brains get activated because suddenly you're leaving the nest, the psychological nest that they've known as, even though it may not have been a comfortable environment for you both. Your change signals their brain that something is wrong. Somebody is doing something different, and the world might end. And so they will engage with these. But we teach people how to be resilient in the face of that pushback, so that they can stay calm and non-defensive and remain clear and stick to their new behavior. And very often the other party, whether it be a partner, a family member, a friend, a colleague, very often after some time of change back behavior and pushback and tribal shaming, they will start to behave differently, more positively, start to change things on their side as well. So, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, and it may not be painful.
It may not.
It doesn't have to be. I mean, I've found work that when I can really hold my center and speak to somebody in a really a conscious and respectful way about changing a dynamic, and it may not even be about changing the dynamic. I can just start to respond differently. Very often people will feel more respected, and they'll reflect back to me my own state of honoring myself in the relationship. It can sometimes just change very easily and gracefully. Typically, though, if people aren't doing the work intentionally, there will be some falling back into old ways, and we expect that for people on the course too. It's not like you're suddenly going to be perfect. It's an ongoing process.
That's right. Someone wrote in, is this only for people in leadership roles? Well, first of all, at EQUUS, we define leadership very, very broadly. There's the traditional sense of leadership as, you have direct reports, you are a boss, you have a team that you direct. That's a very limited sense of leadership or a definition of leadership. We invite you to think of leadership as this: taking 100% responsibility for how you show up in any of your settings, community, professionally, personally, with your families, and being 100% accountable to being the best human you can be inside those settings. That's leadership. That's self-leadership. That's leading your own life, leading your family, leading your intentions. And so from that definition, everyone is a leader. They're all leading something. It's just about becoming more deliberate about it. But this course is for midwives, magicians, CEOs, violinists, anybody who's human and who interacts with the world. Wouldn't you say, Rom?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say who isn't a leader?
Yeah.
I mean, on some level, and it's also about, somebody who thinks that they're not a leader. I think that is a holding of the self small, which is not true. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. In this course, you mentioned before how we set up peer exchanges, and you really get this supportive peer group, because change can be scary and it can take some sustained intentionality. And there's aspects of it that are going to put you face to face with things that are going to trigger you. And to have the support of a group, that's another lovely thing I see happening in this course over time, is that people get really tight as a group. And there's this wonderful sense of peer support and making significant, valuable changes in your life. So you can step into your own leadership. And when you falter, or you find that there's a challenge and it's hard for you, you've got a whole network of people to reach out to.
Yeah. Here's another question. I've done a lot of assertiveness work, but it hasn't really moved the needle. How is this course different? I think this is a good one for both of us, Rom. What I'd like to say is that the secret sauce has to do with the experiential processes that we do. We have you learn with your whole body. And that's where neural networks and neural pathways change. And when that change, mindsets change. And when mindsets change, behaviors change. We create a lot of safety for people to try on new ways of being inside a learning community that is very, very safe. What else, Ron, would you say makes the difference with our course?
Well, I don't know what other courses people have looked at. I do remember things like, from the 1970s, assertiveness trainings, but then they just had people go out and tell the truth no matter what. And that was often not very pleasant and didn't really help relationships. As a matter of fact, it was often very harmful. So when there's just assertiveness, not balanced by empathy and compassion, then it's a kind of a recipe for conflict, and for pointless conflict. So we like to take a very holistic view of assertiveness. What is balanced, compassionate assertiveness? What do we call it? Empowered empathy.
Yes.
That can be a profound level of assertiveness. And so it's a whole other orientation.
And when we teach people about really understanding about their nervous system, actualizing yourself, articulating yourself into the world as your authentic self can be very triggering because we've been taught since childhood to behave a certain way, to be a good girl, to be a good boy, do this, to handle everybody's expectations. And so in helping people, the participants learn how to recognize when they're activated, know how to self-regulate, this helps them to be much more successful in their attempts to be assertive.
Yes, and I would just add to that again, it comes back to encouraging people, supporting people, and not holding themselves small, because when we do cut ourselves off from our authenticity, we fragment ourselves, and a fragmented self does not have the same power to enter into life and affect change and actually feel that one is living fully. As you have that permission to come into your authentic self, you kind of, all the parts come together, and there's a much more sense of wholeness with which you're operating, and that naturally has a very different feeling. It's very empowering. It's very looks at the big picture. It's well, come on the course and see for yourself.
So we have time for one more question, and this is a good one. What are the outcomes you've experienced for people who have taken the course? I'll let you start, Ram, and then I'll finish up.
Well, what people report is increased satisfaction in relationships is one, because they're able to enter a relationship more fully and get establish a whole new way of relating with their partner. I'd say people get an ability to advocate for themselves in professional relationships that they didn't have before. What I see, though, is really the change is it's ongoing. We'll hear from people 6 months or a year or two later who are having these discoveries because they've learned to trust themselves in the situation. That's really the bottom line. It's not that you can pinpoint, okay, this change or that change. It's more the ability to respond to life and keep learning and keep growing. That gets really turned on in this course. Once that's on, it continues.
I can speak personally, I think, because, you and I designed this course because we saw a need that was out there, but also just selfishly, I needed it
Sure.
because I was such a chronic pleaser. And just the other day, somebody said to me, a very old friend who's known me for a long time, they said, wow, you are so much more empathic than I've ever known you. You're so compassionate. And she said, you've always been that way, but it's like there's something deeper about it. And she said, what is it? And I said, well, interestingly, I learned to advocate for myself for the first time, really advocate for myself in a way that I felt confident was kind and respectful to the other, but still didn't compromise on what I needed. And because I could do that, I trusted myself. And because I can trust myself, I have the freedom to be more compassionate with others, because I realize that compassion isn't going to cost me. So that's a big change.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think that, in listening to you, I could feel what you're talking about. We definitely, in this course, people really come more into touch with their ability to feel what others are experiencing, because I'd say that is an innate capacity we all have. And as we step into our authenticity more, we naturally become more sensitive, but not sensitive from a place of getting overwhelmed, sensitive from a place of showing up as the empowered empaths that we are.
Yeah. So we really would love to see you there. We have limited space for this course. There is only 12 spaces available in this course. We have quite a few filled already. And the course starts, I wonder, Kelsey, if you could throw the dates for the course are March 17th through June 23rd, with a break on May 5th, Fridays at 9 a.m., 9 to 11. Obviously, if you can't make all of them, there'll be some that are recorded. And we we have kept the course deliberately small so that the everyone can really have good time and attention and care inside the course. So we hope to see you there. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, Rom.
Thanks, Kelly.
Bye.